Welcome to the channel. This is my first attempt at a YouTube battle report. I quite like the style of just having the still images and talking over the images, so when you're painting you can just glance up at the screen and see what the narrator is talking about and then get back to it, taking some inspiration from Once Bitten's battle reports that I quite enjoy watching on YouTube. I'm going to try this format for a bit, see how I get on with it. Had a bit of fun doing the the video editing and the little jingle at the start. I hope you like it. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. If I can get into the swing of taking photos as I do battle reports, get used to this video editing software, then I can start to crank these out quite quickly after each battle, and hopefully people enjoy the format and they'll subscribe to the channel. So let's get to it. We've got a 5,000 point game between the Dwarfs and the Forces of Chaos. So we did 2,500 points double, so 4 of us. And it was good fun. We met up in London on a Saturday and had a few beers and a big game. Fits the table quite well. That's the table you can see there, of course. We've got big space in the middle. We've got some terrain as well. Some, as you can see, some ruined buildings there and some woods. The armies fit quite well on the 4x6 table for 5,000 points. My first time doing a big game like this, it worked quite well. Didn't take quite as long as I thought it would take, and fun was had by all. Okay, let's get to it. The Forces of Chaos from left to right here. Then we've got the Chaos Chariot, Mark of Slaanesh, in the far left-hand corner there. 5 Marauder Horsemen, Mark of Slaanesh. 4 of the big boy Skull Crushers of Khorne, a greater demon of Slaanesh, the Keeper of Secrets lurking in the shadows there. In front of it, I believe that's called a Hellflayer Chariot. We then got 2 blocks of Demonettes. One of them had a Herald. I think he was a wizard as well. I think rolled up the Hysterical Frenzy or perhaps the Acquiescence. Can't remember at the top of my head. I think it was the Frenzy. Moving on to the middle here, then you can see those 2 blocks of beautifully painted Demonettes. Followed by the big Exalted Seeker Chariot. That's the big one with 8 wounds and the double impact hits. Then got a block of 6 Fiends of Slaanesh. Behind them, the big block of Nurgle, Sword and Board, Chaos Warriors, Exalted Champion, all sorts of nasty things in there. Perhaps Banner of Swiftness as well or something like that. Gorby's Chariot. You can also see another Seeker Chariot of Slaanesh behind it. And some War Dogs. And then tucked into the corner, you can see some winged beasts there behind the terrain. That's a Chimera, regeneration of course, a Nurgle Demon Prince on the Law of Death with all the tools. The front there you've got the Slaaneshi Fast Cav Seeker a small unit, or it looks like 6 Chaos Knights there, I believe with the Mark of Nurgle as well, and another chariot. I think that looks like another Hellflayer Chariot, sort of wedged into the corner there. So you've got a big sort of 3 sort of flanking units, sort of ready to come round on that flank. And facing up against the unholy alliance of demons and warriors of chaos were the plucky dwarves. Now, the 2 armies have a bit of a different aesthetic to them. My army's got the old sort of metal models, and Callum's army's got the sort of newer plastic ones. One of his units, as you can see in the near side of the picture there on the left flank, is the Iron Drakes, and the rest of his army is on the other flank, which I'll come to in a minute. So what I took there from right to left now is the 2 Gyrocopters out on the left flank. Had 1 block of 20 Slayers, followed by 40 Dwarf Warriors with great weapons in horde formation. The next block along there is 30 Dwarf Warriors with great weapons deployed in ranks of 5. You've then got another block of 20 Slayers, so lots of Dwarves today. No elite Dwarves, no Longbeards or Hammerers this time around, but lots of Dwarf Warriors and Slayers. That's the way to do it. We've got a couple of organ guns interspersed between the units there, fit quite tightly to them with engineers, and also 2 grudge throwers at the back of the board there. And on the right flank there you can see the bulk of Callum's army, another beautifully painted army. You can see the sort of big unit fillers, sort of the rocks and stuff sticking up out of the middle of the units there. Never been a big fan of doing unit fillers myself. Got no problem playing against people who use unit fillers, but just never been a fan of actually doing them for my own units. But Callum does do them very well. If you ever get a chance to sort of see this army close up, he's got some cool conversions, and it does work very well. So we got the main block there of hammerers with the tanked up Dwarf Lord. Tanky and tanked up. I have it on good authority. He was tanked up as well, and that's his sort of main punchy unit. You got the gyrocopter next along behind the wall there, followed by the sword and board dwarf warriors, and the next one along is the sword and board longbeards. So he's got 4 blocks, including the iron drakes on the left flank, and he also had 40 miners, which is the 5th block there. Held in reserve that would come on as ambushers. And it's funny, he showed me the list beforehand, we were talking about it, and he's got those main 4 blocks which he's taken the Stroller's rune. I think the BSB must have been in the Warriors unit there, so they'd all be vanguarding. And I took a look at the list beforehand, and I sort of said to him, I love the list, I love the units you've taken, and I love miners, they're great, but are you sure about the vanguarding, right? Are you sure you want to get really close to this Warriors of Chaos army that's going to have big blocks of Chaos Warriors and Demon Princes and chariots and all that? It kind of strikes me as the sort of army that you want to avoid getting into combat with for as long as possible. But Callum assured me that it was work, and he was proven right to a certain extent, as you're about to find out. So after vanguarding, you can see on that same right flank, gyrocopter coming up, the hammerers moving right towards the middle of the table, and the longbeards and warriors right on the right flank as well, also coming up in support of the hammerers. There's the Seeker Slaanesh fast cav as well, vanguarding into that same zone. And on the left flank, you've got the Marauder Horsemen vanguarding up there. The Iron Drakes also tried to vanguard, but were kind of blocked a little bit because the Marauder Horsemen were there, and they couldn't vanguard too close. But they got a bit nearer anyway, so they could easily fire their guns on turn 1, and the stage was set. So a lot happened on turn 1, probably the biggest turn 1 I've actually ever seen with playing a dwarf army. But the hammerers moved up even further from their vanguarding position into the other side of the board, really in that sort of bring it on, come get me position there by the wood. And the other units move forward as well, including the gyrocopter, which you can see getting a little bit out of position there, after having done a bombing run, I believe, on the right flank. And then, of course, on the chaos turn, the forces just surged forward, including, as you can see in the centre picture there, the Exalted Chariot. And we did try and take out the Exalted Chariot with my organ guns and stone throwers and everything. Threw all we could at it, but we couldn't quite get 8 wounds off it. I think we got 6 out of 8 wounds or something like that. So it still managed to crash into those hammerers and get those all-important impact hits. The next one along is the Gorbeast Chariot, followed by another Seeker Chariot. So there's 3 chariots hit that hammer unit very hard in turn 1. And I sort of thought to myself, oh god, if that unit doesn't hold, we're going to have a big problem in the middle of the park here. You can also see the hounds charging into the dwarf warriors there. You can see the Seekers, Slaaneshi charging into the gyrocopter, or perhaps it was the gyrocopter that charged into Slaaneshi, I can't remember now. And the big scary Chimera and Demon Prince advancing up. Chaos Warriors in reserve there, wasn't well in reserve, but behind the lines, also moving up to sort of take on whatever emerges from that flank. And the Fiends of Slaanesh not taking advantage of their movement 10, also sort of staying back, being a bit cautious and seeing where they can get involved a bit later. In the middle then you've got the units of Demonettes advancing up, and you can just see one of my gyrocopters in the bottom left there, just positioning itself behind the terrain. Staying on this flank for now then, you can see the casualties inflicted by that massive chariot charge on the hammer unit and really taking out those sort of two ranks effectively of hammerers. But of course they're stubborn and they've got the Dwarf Lord in the unit, so they're not going anywhere. And typical hammerer fashion, they take a lot of hits and a lot of casualties and then proceed to vaporize anything that's in base to base with it. Apart from this Gore-Beast chariot, of course, that's got the toughness 6 and God knows how many wounds. You can also see that the Dwarf warriors there beat off the dogs, broke them, and actually pursued towards that combat. So they've moved up, and you've got that one Warhound that's still sort of running away there. Casualties taken in the gyrocopter fight, but that stayed steady. And the Longbeard you can see there unengaged in combat as well. I believe there was some magic from the Demon Prince, or perhaps it was the Seeker that did the magic, I can't remember now. Over on the other flank you can see the Chaos advancing there, the Keeper of Secrets going into a position on the left flank. Oh yeah, I remember now. So my gyrocopter came and did a bombing run on those Marauder horsemen and actually took them all out. And then sort of parked itself behind the terrain there. But then in the magic phase on Chaos turn 1, the Greater Demon just annihilated it with a Caco Bomb. They also got off Acquiescence on the Iron Drakes there, giving them random movement. We also made a mistake because I gyro bombed the Marauder Horseman, but then I forgot that the Marauder Horseman was the only target that the Iron Drakes had within range of their guns, so I should have just left the Iron Drakes to shoot first and done something else with the gyrocopter. But hey, it was early days and we made a mistake. And the rest of the Dwarf lines held firm in the centre of the table there, not moving up yet and just concentrating the shooting on turn 1. As I said before, it was concentrated on the chariot, which was later killed by the hammerers. Dwarf turn 2, my surviving gyrocopter moved into the position there to try and chaff up the Skull Crushers. We were quite fortunate in that the terrain there had sort of created a bit of a bottleneck for the Forces of Chaos, especially as their chariot and demonette unit was quite wide. And I was able to just tuck in there where I could steam gun the demonette's unit and also create the get in the way of those Skull Crushers to keep them occupied. And Callum had the good idea that actually once that gyrocopter does sacrifice itself, as it inevitably will against those Skull Crushers, they're frenzied, so they have to then pursue and get sort of tangled up, perhaps for 2 turns. So that gyrocopter would keep those Skull Crushers occupied for 2 turns, which seems like quite a good trade-off of 80 points, considering that flank is a little bit weaker on the Dwarven side, and we don't want those Skull Crushers and those chariots just careering through and then coming round to my war machines. So the combat with the hammerers and the Gore-Beast chariot raged on for another round, unable to defeat the hammer unit and unable to destroy the Gore-Beast chariot yet. The Longbeards charged in to help the ailing gyrocopter into the Slaanesh fast cav, and the Dwarf warrior unit moved up as well in line with the hammerers, so that big block of Chaos warriors would have something to think about in front, but they're also going to have something to think about behind them, because the 40 miners came on there in a very intimidating position right behind that block of Chaos warriors, out of arc of sight of the fiends and the demonettes, really in a good position there to get involved. If those hammerers and those Dwarf warriors can hold at the front, then it looks like that Gore-Beast chariot and those Chaos warriors are really going to be trapped between a rock and a hard place. There is, however, the wild card of the Demon Prince on the flank there, but you'll see how that pans out in a minute. You may have also noticed in this picture that it is missing one other beast. The Chimera took a stone to the face from the Grudge Thrower on turn 2, hit, wound, d6 wounds. So at this point I decided we needed a change of pace from the Dwarves. We'd held steady on turn 1 and concentrated on the shooting, but it looked now that the action was going to happen on that right flank, with those miners coming on behind the Chaos Warriors. Those fiends and those demonettes are probably going to pivot towards the bulk of the fight where Callum's forces are on that right flank, and in that case my units needed to move up, otherwise they're just going to be there with nothing to do in the middle of the park, and they wouldn't be useful enough there, because the fight was really going to happen in the middle of the board and not at the Dwarf board edge, where it normally does in many games against Dwarves, as I'm sure you guys know. So on Chaos turn 2, the Demon Prince declared a charge into the flank of the Dwarf Warriors, who elected to flee. As you can see, they're fleeing in the diagonal towards my army. And then I can't remember what happened exactly, whether the Demon Prince redirected or failed its charge or what happened, but it ended up staying there, sort of behind the terrain there. Perhaps it tried to get into the gyrocopter, but ended up staying there, and then trying the death magic instead of getting into combat. Turned out to be quite a good tactical flee, as you'll find out in a minute. The next charge came in then with the Demonettes into the side of the Hammerers, and the Chaos Warriors into the front of the Hammerers as well. Now those Hammerers really low on numbers now, with another 2 units piling in. This really was crunch time for Callum's main unit. However, that Dwarf Lord was tanky, as I said, and when I say tanky, we're talking full Dwarf Lord tankiness of toughness 6 and 4 wounds and 1 up save with a ward save and all the trimmings. So he wasn't going anywhere anytime soon because they're leadership 10 and they're stubborn. So and I think as the way it's positioned, when those Chaos Warriors came in, because they were just touching corner to corner with the side of the unit, they could only throw attacks into the Dwarf Lord. So it'd be just a matter of how much combat risk can they build up and try and win that combat. But then, of course, as long as the Hammerers are still alive, that Dwarf Lord is testing on a leadership 10. On the other flank, then the other Hellflayer chariot charges into my big block of Dwarf Warriors quite suicidally, but I guess that the chariot wanted to. I think it'd been hit by the organ gun. That's it, and it didn't have many wounds left. And so I think it just wanted to get into combat and do some impact hits before dying. Fair enough. The Slayers moved up behind the Iron Drakes there, and the Iron Drakes took out some of the. I think maybe they shot into the chariot as well. They took out some of the Demonettes. As you can see, the Skull Crushers have charged into the side of the gyrocopter. The artillery park still very much intact in the middle. Yeah, and you can see the outcome of the combat there with just the sort of Dwarf Lord and the champion. I believe it's champion on perhaps a standard bearer, just sort of fighting it out there. You've also got the Chaos Knights in the background who've got sort of countercharged there by the Longbeards. I think the Longbeards pursued the Seeker Demonettes into the Chaos Knights. So those Chaos Knights really sort of having a bad day at the office there. They've just sort of been sort of hemmed in the corner there by other units, and have now got a big squad of Longbeards in the face. And the Fiends, as you can see, the Fiends have backed up there to sort of get into charge arc of those miners. I guess sort of anticipate, perhaps they're looking at self-preservation or looking to get a countercharge into those miners if those miners decide to go into the back of those Chaos Warriors. And let's find out what happens. And the Seeker finished the turn looking very intimidating on their left flank. I can't remember what spells were cast there. I think the magic dice were used for the Demon Prince predominantly to try and snipe off the Dwarven Battle Standard Bearer or Dwarf Lord with some death magic, which I think failed. Turn 3. So the first block of Slayers there in the middle charged into the flank of the Demonettes. Now I was pretty confident with the +1 strength on the charge and getting them in the flank like that to actually sort of crash through them and try and crumble the unit. I think they'd actually become detached from the Hammerers combat, even though they were obviously engaged last turn, because they'd simply sort of run out of foes to fight there. It was quite a big combat. Anyway, we made contact on the flank there. As you can see, also the Dwarf Warriors behind them have rallied. The battle rages on the right flank there with the Longbeards on the Chaos Knights. Pretty much a stalemate. That chariot behind it unable to join the fight because it just simply doesn't have the room. And of course, the main event on turn 3, the horde of 40 miners crashed into the back of the Chaos Warrior unit. And at this point, I must admit, I was actually in stitches. Just the sight of all of those miners just coming on at the backboard edge there. And because, of course, we'd vanguarded forward, because Callum's army on the right flank had vanguarded forward, the miners didn't have far to go. The Dwarf Lord, in all his tankiness, was holding up this Corby's chariot, this massive block of Chaos Warriors, which was pretty much the toughest unit on the board at that point, because there weren't many hammerers left, and that block of Chaos Warriors is pretty deadly. And to get a massive charge with a horde in the arse is pretty devastating. And the Chaos Warriors did not live to tell the tale. And that really was one of the big turning points in the game. As you can see there, the Dwarf Lord, if you can just pick him out there in front of the miners, was sort of left on his own then, without any hammerers there. The Demonettes were taken out by the Slayers, really leaving the centre of the park there controlled by big blocks of dwarves. However, the battle was still raging on the flanks, and of course the Demon Prince and the Greater Demon still very much alive. On the other flank, the Iron Drakes did a 360 in order to try and take out the Greater Demon, which you can't see in the picture there. It's just off the left side of the camera. I think you can see the tip of its blade there. Exposing their rear, of course, to the Demonettes. The Skull Crushers were being held up by another turn because they couldn't really wheel past those Demonettes to get the charge off. But with those Iron Drakes being quick to fire, being able to swivel round and shoot at the Greater Demon, seemed like a good opportunity to try and take it out. I don't think the Stone Throwers had an arc of sight to see it, or perhaps one of them did, even though they were just because of the terrain rather, and so it was a good opportunity to see if we could kill it. The the Demon Prince and the Fiends moved up into advantageous positions there, sort of behind the miners, to see if they could sort of force the miners to either do an about face and take them on, where the Demon Prince could also perhaps going for Purple Sun or going for another sniper spell at the Dwarf Lord. You can also see that Hellflayer chariot finally getting some space there to manoeuvre around to get prepared for a turn 4 charge. The Demonettes crashed into the Iron Drakes and into the rear rather, and I think that's a picture afterwards of the Iron Drakes having reformed after winning the combat or losing the combat. Can't remember. Looked pretty even. As you can see, those Skull Crushers there have reformed to fit through that gap, and the one Chaos Chariot can't fit through at all, but it's sort of waiting to get involved. And that's how things looked at the end of turn 3. We've got the Dwarves still sort of controlling the middle of the park there. The big block of the horde of Dwarf Warriors had sort of pivoted now to take that charge from the Skull Crushers. I was quite confident of being able to survive that because got my BSB and General in that unit. The BSB has the Rune of Stoicism on there. You got a horde of Dwarf Warriors, Strength 5. They're stubborn. So confident of being able to survive that, and hopefully I can get those Slayers involved, which are sort of currently in a bit of a bad position behind the Iron Drakes, and they sort of pivoted to face the Keeper of Secrets, and then of course the Keeper of Secrets just up sticks and left. And I like this photo. It's down at the level of the Keeper there. It's just come round to the back lines behind the dwarves. The size of that Keeper of Secrets, beautiful model. These big models are so big. I mean, I remember when I first got into Warhammer, the Greater Demons were, on the, I think it's still on a 50mm base, but it's they were sort of half the size of the current ones. But these new models are fantastic, and you can just see that big demon there, just sort of overseeing behind all those dwarves, just ready to let off some powerful magic, but didn't make combat yet. Turn 4, so that would be the last we see of the Keeper of Secrets, because he just got too close to the artillery park there, and as you can see, the organ gun in the bottom of the picture and the other organ gun has swiveled round. Even though it survived that barrage from the Iron Drakes, the combined organ guns and stone throwers then managed to take it out. So the Keeper fell. The Demon Prince and the Fiends charged the rear of the miners, which didn't look too good for them. But they've done their job. Actually, sorry, I'm forgetting a few things here. Let's just take a step back because it was Dwarf turn 4 first. So let me get this right. So I believe the Chaos Warriors defeated. Sorry, this is going back to the end of turn 3 now. Defeated the Longbeards and pursued them forward, which I don't have a picture of. And then, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, if you're listening, but the Chaos Warriors then came. Sorry, Chaos Knights rather. Sorry, Chaos Knights. Chaos Knights were in combat with the Longbeards at the top of the picture. They overran forward somewhere in front of the miners. The miners then declared a charge on those Chaos Knights, which elected to flee towards the Dwarf board edge. I think then the Dwarf Lord also charged those knights, and they fled even more, and so they actually got right to the Dwarf board edge, where they would rally on Chaos turn 4. You've also seen that picture, the Dwarf Warriors charging into where the Exalted Chariot was. Not Exalted Chariot, the Hellflare Chariot, and destroying that. So sort of towards the end of this picture, sort of the beginning of Chaos turn 4, where you've got the Demon Prince and Fiends able to charge those miners, because those miners never turned around. They charged forward into those Chaos Knights. So I've got a few pictures missing there for context, but a lot happened over that side of the board. And there you can see on the right hand side of the picture where those Chaos Knights ended up rallying on Chaos turn 4, right at the Dwarf board edge, and they'd be the next target for the guns, I think, on Dwarf turn 5. The Dwarf Warriors charged into the sides of the Demonettes on Dwarf turn 4, and on Chaos turn 4, the Chariot and Skull Crushers came into the Dwarf Warriors, setting up a big combat on the left side of the board there. I made another mistake here by pivoting my Slayers and trying to get around the Iron Drakes, and the Iron Drakes ended up breaking and fleeing past the Slayers, and so on hindsight I should have just kept my Slayers where they were, so that as the Iron Drakes fled they could then charge into the side of the Chariot, but they got out of position, and I think they never made combat in the game, unfortunately. With the miners dead and buried, I believe the Dwarf Lord, having joined the unit of Dwarf Warriors, charged into the Fiends. The other unit of Slayers charged into the Demon Prince, those Slayers charging in there, I thought they'd probably be there at the end of the game now, because you've got an unbreakable monster and an unbreakable unit, we'd have a chance of killing it, because of course we get extra attacks when the Demon Prince kills Slayers. But then again, that Demon Prince was very tooled up, and I'm not sure we would have got through its armor safes very effectively. The Dwarf Warriors still held on the left flank, and that battle raged on. I think one on the Skull Crusher light there. The Dwarf Artillery Park still very much intact there. As you can see, the organ guns are swiveled to the right to take out that unit of Chaos Knights. Oh yes, and the Slayers didn't make it, because I think the Demon Prince unleashed the Purple Sun, combined with its attacks, just took out the Slayer unit. Fortunately, though, for those Dwarf Warriors, it was a very slow Purple Sun, and just took out the Slayers. And as you can see, didn't quite make it to the Dwarf Warriors there. Although I think, as you can see, the champion of that unit is missing. I think the Demon Prince then managed to snipe the champion, because that was the only character it had in range, or in line of sight or something. I can't remember why that champion died. Perhaps it was one of the death magic spells. So on the final turn, the Iron Drake came back into the fight again. The Dwarf Warriors getting pretty much annihilated on turn 5, and really on their last legs in turn 6 there, with my General and BSB, I think, still alive at this point, but just by themselves. And the other units sort of moving up, ready to engage the Skull Crushers and Chariot when they punch through. The Dwarf Warriors managed to get a rear charge onto the Demon Prince then, had a very good go at trying to kill it. I think it was left on like 1 or 2 wounds and passed some crucial ward saves at the end there, and the Dwarf Lord didn't manage to bring it down, unfortunately. And then in the final Chaos turn 6, the Skull Crushers managed to punch through. As you can see, my Dwarf Lord and BSB are still alive there, and managed to take out the Chaos Chariot and the Demonettes, and those Skull Crushers managed to break through the Dwarf lines finally on turn 6 and get into contact with the Organ Gun. And that's where the game finished up. Really enjoyable game. My first time doing a big game of this type. Didn't take all day. We'd planned for an all-day affair, but I think it took about 5 hours, perhaps getting on for 6 hours at a very leisurely pace. So it was very enjoyable. Some lessons learned, of course. The Stroller's List of the Dwarves, which I wouldn't have the guts to try myself, actually did sort of pull off at the end, because we were just sort of doing the unexpected and really able to kind of pin the Chaos Army in place, at least on that flank, on their side of the table. And of course, having that tanky Dwarf Lord and that unit of Hammerers, they just weren't able to break it down. And it sort of held back the whole tides of chaos for like 3 whole turns. And sort of preventing them from bringing everything to bear on the rest of our army. So we were able to get some flank charges off, and of course the rear charge of the miners. And that was the big turning point of the game. That big Chaos Warrior unit dying in 1 turn. And of course that Keeper of Secrets dying on turn 3 or 4, was it? Those were the main sort of turning points of the game. We all met on the tournament scene, and so we sort of worked out the sort of final results using the Triple Crown format, and it worked out as I think it was a 13-7 or 14-6 or something like that, in terms of the final score to the Dwarves. So it was a Dwarf victory in the end. Perhaps Dave and Michael look back and think perhaps they could have had more units in the middle of the board, rather than getting things too much on the flanks. They had a few bottlenecks there on the left and on the right, where they couldn't sort of bring their chariots in properly. They couldn't had some units that couldn't get into combat when they perhaps wanted to get into combat. We were able to get a good flee reaction from those Dwarf Warriors that prevented the Demon Prince getting into combat early. The Keeper of Secrets was a bit afraid of those Iron Drakes having a stand and shoot, and therefore also delayed getting into combat for a bit and ended up getting cannoned off. So there were, and the big turning point of the game, of course, being those Chaos Warriors dying in 1 turn, and not really getting to use the full might of that unit. And of course, I think the Chaos BSB was in that unit as well, and the whole unit getting wiped out was a big swing. But yeah, big game, very enjoyable. Definitely do it again. With some different armies next time. Hope you liked the format. It was a bit long, this one, because it was a bit of a long battle report, but in future, a bit of a long game rather, so it turned out to be a long video. But in future, hopefully I'll do a shorter video for a shorter game. If you liked it, hit the like button and leave a comment. Cheers, speak to you soon, bye.